Chris Lee and Blake Lovell here as we continue our previews of SEC football teams for the 2022 season. Today we get to the Alabama Crimson Tide. Most people's pick for number one overall. Blake, it says a lot about a program that in a quote-unquote down year where there were some identifiable gaps in Alabama compared to other Alabama teams, and nobody take offense here. The bar is as high as it's ever been in the history of college football when we talk about Alabama in the Nick Saban era, but still should be a better Alabama team this year, and one that's frankly going to be very difficult to unseat for the national title.
Yeah, this is going to be an Alabama team. That's probably the best way to put it. When you talk about having a Heisman Trophy winner at quarterback, you've got a dominant playmaker on defense. I think you pretty much expect just plug and play at running back. Wide receiver unit, there will be guys that emerge from that group, obviously losing what they lose there. And I think you're going to have improvement in several different areas. I think the offensive line will be better. That's the best way to put it. It's going to be an Alabama team. Like, this is going to be your usual that you get. And, I think comparing this team to last year's team, there are obviously going to be differences. But like we just said, this last year's team was told to be a down, season or whatever. But the fact is they got to the national championship. And, I think that will be the expectation once again. And they are the favorite heading into it. So
let's start on offense. Bryce Young, the reigning Heisman winner, is back. Probably could improve his efficiency, maybe getting rid of the ball a little quicker. I don't know that he's got a receiving core for the ages for Alabama if you compare to 3 or 4 years ago, but he's certainly got a great one. And they've got a pass-catching back in Jahmyr Gibbs from Georgia Tech. Just weapons all over the place. They've got him at the tight end position too. My question is maybe the offensive line, and we can touch on that in a minute, but still, Alabama's got offensive weapons, which is just, again, this is Alabama football we're speaking of here.
Yeah, they've got plenty to choose from, I think. And like you said, I think obviously there's going to be pressure on Bryce Young coming into the season, given the fact that, comes back to school. He's a reigning Heisman Trophy winner and, first team All-American. Every statistical award you could probably find, there are expectations for him this season. And yeah, so I think that's it. It's just, how do you see it from an individual standpoint? Like, of just how is he continuing to progress as a quarterback? And I think that's the things you're going to want to see. And that's what, Nick Saban will certainly focus on. He's not thinking about Bryce Young winning the Heisman Trophy. He's not thinking about anything he did last year. It's just, how can we continue to get this guy better, each week, each game. And I think that's going to be kind of fun to see, just kind of how he continues to evolve as a quarterback, knowing he's going to be a very high draft pick and go on to start a lot in the NFL. But, elsewhere, like you said, I think it's it's a group that certainly, you look at what they're going to have, plugging in Gibbs at running back and those kind of things. Like, there's so much to work with. And I think that's where you look at this offense and feel like, you do have the stability at quarterback. So you feel like everything else is going to kind of work its way around that. And you'll have guys, like I mentioned, certainly a Jameson Williams isn't there. And we know kind of what you have to do to replace someone like that. But, you bring in Jermaine Burton from Georgia. You've got a very talented group there. You've got someone, you've got speed, I think, at that position at wide receiver. And there's just, again, it's just going to be how do you stop this team? And I think that's going to be the big question. Although, like you mentioned, I think the offensive line will be better. It's just a matter of kind of looking and seeing how things kind of unfold at that position too. So,
well, Alabama, of course, does a lot of reloading through the transfer portal, and Tyler Harrell was Louisville's best receiver. He, of course, will start. They've already had an injury or two at receiver. Yeah, in camp, but it's just next guy up. It's a slew of 4- and 5-star recruits, but running back, Gibbs is where I'm really interested to see him play, because Georgia Tech wasn't very good the last couple of years. Again, he does a lot of stuff, and I've even seen people say that he could be the best Heisman candidate on that offense, which includes the guy that won it last year. That's probably taken a little bit of license on my part, but the point I'm making here is that he's supposed to be a tremendous playmaker for them and is going to make a lot of waves early for an Alabama offense. I mean, and just seeing Bryce Young with the guy, and look, they've had guys that could catch the ball out of the backfield before, but I don't know that they've had one quite like this guy in that respect.
Yeah, and I think you're banking on, we've kind of seen how Bill O'Brien will use a guy like that. And I think you're kind of banking on the possibilities there. And like, I mean, it's always a decent bet that you could say a Heisman Trophy winner, pick your team and position. Alabama running back's always going to be high up on that list, just given kind of what you're going to get from that position. But I think with what O'Brien's going to be able to do there, yeah, I mean, there's, the expectation that's just what we talk about, just the different options and the different looks you're going to be able to present to teams and say, all right, how are you going to stop us? Like, it's just, that's what Alabama's going to be able to do in so many situations. Again, knowing that you have the quarterback, you have the running back group, we talk about the speed at wide receiver, and just the different things. I think that's where, again, we talk about, you can say what you want about Bill O'Brien, but there can't be a happier person going into the season looking at all the options that he has to look at and feel like, man, I can do this, I can do that. And it is like, yeah, you can look at some of the guys Alabama lost last year and went on to be, first round picks in the NFL and are going to go on to have very successful careers. But we've seen this before, and you're just going to see some of these guys really emerge from this group. And like you said, maybe even a guy comes right in and emerges as a Heisman Trophy winner in year one with Alabama. So,
My question about Alabama's offense, and again, all questions about Alabama are relative, is this is not an offensive line that tackle to tackle is maybe one of the best Alabama has had. And I really was shocked when they picked up Tyler Steen from Vanderbilt to be their left tackle. I didn't think he was that great at Vandy. I did not see that one coming, but that's where I'm a little concerned for them, especially when it comes to protecting their quarterback's blind side.
yeah, and I think that's fair in terms of looking at that. And, again, I think that's an area that you'll look at and understand the value there too, right? And just how important it's going to be with this offense, and specifically how it's going to be set up, and knowing who you're protecting and and just the approach they're going to take. So that will be something I think you'll see talked about a lot, especially in some of these bigger games, right? Where you're going up against, we were talking top 10 SEC type teams, top 15 SEC teams, and maybe does that storyline come into play in those kind of games? I think that's what you're really looking at when you talk about that specific area. So, yeah, I think that will be interesting to watch. But again, I think the expectation is that they're gonna keep getting better, and that's just seemingly what an Alabama team does. And I think that they've got plenty of resource to use there to where that offensive line will be able to do what they need to do to get them where they want to go. So.
No, defensively, they were good a year ago, but it was not the Alabama defense that we are used to seeing, where you've got just tons of NFL first rounders up front. They've had them in the back end. I mean, it seems like all their corners are first rounders. Drop off last year defensively from what they've been, but again, they were reloading a little bit. And this year, I don't know that this sets up as an Alabama defense for the ages, but it sure might. And where you start, of course, is Will Anderson. I mean, and you talk about tradition at linebacker. I mean, Alabama, goodness gracious, we could sit here and name them forever. Derek Thomas, Cornelius Bennett. They've got another one of those next guy in that stratosphere guy with Will Anderson, who I think had 31 stops for loss. I think they had to at some point take him out of practices or spring games so that they didn't get Bryce Young killed. They just couldn't stop him. We talked about the defending Heisman winner, but I mean, even last year, you heard it that the best player on Alabama may have been Will Anderson last year.
And he may be the best player in the country this year.
Yeah.
Like he may.
May I stop you from it? Because I've got a pet peeve. It drives me bananas that a defensive guy never wins the Heisman.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, if you're that dominant, you're that good. I think you should
Yeah.
always be in the conversation. And he's certainly someone that, who knows, right? Like, would it shock any of us if that's the conversation we're having at the end of the season, where we're looking up saying Bryce Young and Will Anderson were the two most dominant players in terms of their production in college football? I don't think that would surprise any of us. I mean, you're talking about a guy that Look, there's certainly a great chance that he will go number one in the NFL draft in 2023. And again, it's just based off of that incredible skill set and what he does for that defense. And we always talk about the impact one guy can have. Just think about how much easier he makes it to for everyone else. And you're talking about guys. Remember, reminder, everyone else. There's probably a good handful or more of guys in there that are also going to be playing in the NFL. So he's making it easier on guys who who are already NFL talents. So that's a scary proposition too for the opposition. But yeah, I mean, this is a defense, like you said. It's Alabama linebackers. You know what you're getting. Defensive line. I think that's certainly an area where you just expect there will be a pass rush there. They'll push some people around up front. But you talk about just the fantastic linebacking unit. Secondary will be good. I mean, it's like I said. I mean, we're trying to find things here, but when you look at this team on paper, it's understandable why so many people outside of just the usual, well, of course, Alabama's going to be probably either number one, number two, number three in the preseason. Why so many people are looking at this team and saying, talent wise, this could be, an all timer in terms of what Saban could have with a team like this. So,
Well, you're certainly going to have to double team Anderson, which they've got playmakers all over the field beside him. I mean, you can see Dallas Turner benefit from that. Henry Toa, I think, led them in tackles a year ago and probably will again. They've got one of the better safeties in the country returning too, which really helps in battles. So that's another place. And they've got Kool-Aid McKinstry, who I think, I can't remember if he started a year ago, but certainly played a lot, was that next up and coming corner. He'll benefit from that pass rush. Eli Ricks, who,
yeah.
frankly, if you trust Pro Football Focus, Ricks for a couple of years graded higher than Stingley. So that's a place where I look at Alabama and say, I think that bunch got stronger over the offseason from a year ago.
Yeah, and I mean, Ricks he's a projected probably top 15 guy in the draft next year. And yeah, you just talk about skill. And that's why again, they'll have the best linebacker group in the country. They'll have one of the best secondaries in the country. When you put those two together, you think about what you can accomplish on defense, knowing that their defensive line will also be very impactful. So, yeah, there's just, I mean, realistically, again, it's why Alabama's Alabama. You look around this roster, you look at them, and there's just not a lot of question marks because I think some of the questions that you have are questions we've had in the past, and it's like we've seen what the result is. They find the next guy comes in, and he just finds a way to make plays and to produce. And it's always a matter of who's that next guy in line. And we're gonna see some of those guys step up in different spots, but we're also gonna see some of the same faces that got them to the national championship game last year, and two of the more dominant players, like we said, expected to be in college football this year. And we've already seen what they can do, and that's of course Bryce Young and Will Anderson leading the way. So recipe for another Alabama season. So
Here's another thing on that defense, Blake. You look across, and they've got a lot of juniors and seniors. They've got Jordan Battle, again, as a starting safety who's a senior. A lot of times they don't have that in a guy his caliber. Anderson's a junior. Having guys who have played a lot before in that system, I think, is a place where Alabama being a little bit more experienced
yeah.
this year maybe than some past years, because, again, they're losing guys early to the NFL left and right. I do wonder how that plays out for that defense too.
No, it's a good point. More experience than last season. You think about kind of, you know, 2020 and kind of how that impacted sort of the experience, right? And just all across college football when you talk about just how the rosters were structured and and just how things unfolded from there. But now you're talking about a team that does. It gets more experience. You're playing a lot of those upperclassmen, but it's upperclassmen who have played a lot thus far. And I think that's going to be something that will really benefit this team. And again, be another reason why if you're trying to pick those teams, the defending national champion in Georgia, the other teams, the usual bunch that we're all going to talk about all season, Ohio State and some of these other teams, and you try to compare them, that's just one more thing I think you look at with Alabama and say, skill wise, they're better here, they're better there, but oh by the way, like they're going to be more experienced than they were in recent seasons. They have guys who have played in that system. Familiarity's already there. The new guys you expect to come in right away and just be, like we said, one guy could be a Heisman, front runner. It's just all those things combined. Yeah, it makes it hard to find a lot of flaws with this team. So
We've talked about the schedule, but that October is particularly interesting. It starts with, and I'm having a look at the schedule there, at Arkansas, then A&M in the game that everybody's looking forward to, at Tennessee, which won't be a
yeah,
picnic. I know Alabama's owned that series for the better part of 2 decades, but that one could get a little more interesting. Mississippi State, that was not a very interesting game a year ago. That'll be in Tuscaloosa this year. Then, of course, go to LSU and then Auburn to end the season. And then the Texas game in week 2. I think Alabama should get by that one okay, but there's been some hype around the Longhorns. We talked about the schedule, and we didn't think when we previewed it, it's particularly an interesting one in some ways. But I look at it again, and again, there's no pushovers here, or not a lot of them. And I think that October, if something could derail Alabama, it's maybe something in that October where you've got some teams that are really licking their chops, and particularly A&M. Again, I guess that's nothing new. Everybody does that with Alabama. But if you're looking for things that could trip Alabama up, I think that's maybe the stretch that could do it.
yeah, because you talk about that Texas game and the hype surrounding that. Alabama going to Austin. I think it was, what was it on? Of course, we're recording this on Tuesday. I think it was on Monday that Steve Sarkisian talked about a couple of their starters out for the season with season-ending injuries, and I'm trying to remember. I'll find it here at some point, but obviously that's significant. So you kind of look at that game, but it really is. It's that stretch. It's the 3-game stretch at Arkansas, home against A&M, at Tennessee. To me, is the defining stretch of, if you think Alabama's going to run the table, like, I think those are the 3 places that offer the most opportunity to slip up. And to be honest with you, I think it's more like at Arkansas or at Tennessee. I think that to me that A&M game is such a game for Saban to just, like, it's, he's a day by day guy. He's, living in the now, but you can't tell me that he can't wait to get to that game and have his team at their best and try to run Texas A&M off the field. So I think it's those 3 games to me. At Ole Miss could be interesting depending on where Ole Miss is at, but like we talked about before, I don't have I don't have a full grasp on LSU or Ole Miss just yet. So I'm probably, even though those are road games and you'll get their best shot, I think it's at Arkansas, at Tennessee, to me, are the 2 that you circle. Again, we know Alabama will get everybody's best, and I think, given our expectations for both Arkansas and Tennessee, those could be some very entertaining games based on where those 2 teams are at. But undoubtedly, the most hyped up college football game of the entire season will be October 8th, Alabama versus A&M.
Well, even Nick Saban's most dominant teams, and they've basically all been dominant other than year one, they almost always lose a game somewhere, Blake. And again, that points to the SEC and just the meat grinder of a league that it is. A&M's been the nemesis before. Ole Miss has been the nemesis before. So for the last 5 years, they've lost at least one game somewhere. But I wonder if in the end that ends up to their advantage in the postseason, because he uses the rat poison and gets the most out of those guys. And the one thing you don't want to be is the guy playing Nick Saban the week after they lose.
Yeah, it's a good point. I mean, I think he's mastered how to approach the situation before, in terms of, yeah, kind of how things unfold with that. But no, it's a good point. And I mean, we always say too, like, any team we talk about that's in the SEC West, like, we just know kind of the gauntlet you're going to have now in that division specifically. And like we've said, there's certainly some teams coming along in the East too that's making it more interesting. Tennessee, on the rise. Kentucky will be a team that's going to be very good right there, with those teams like a Florida, and of course Georgia's at the top. But yeah, it's just, anytime you play in the West, your schedule is going to be difficult. You're going to have some of those close games, I think, along the way. And especially with a schedule like this, because you are going to go on the road, and again, you do have to play what we probably would project is, the second best team in the East. Some people think a top 10 team heading into the season, in Tennessee on the road. We know Alabama's success in that series, and probably, will certainly still be the favorite heading into that game. But yeah, like we said, I mean, at this point, if you're looking at the schedule, we know what to say, right? Alabama's going to be favored in every game they play in. And at that point, it's just a matter of seeing how the season unfolds and does anything change kind of as things go along. And especially, like we said, I'm so fascinated by that October 1st to October 15th stretch in those 3 games. That's going to be, I think all 3 of those are going to be must see. So,
Yeah, I mean, Alabama just makes it look easy, but here's the thing, Blake. There's 8 teams on that schedule. They won't all be in the top 25 at season's end.
yeah.
But because a lot of them are in the West, and there's not going to be 7 teams in the final top 25 in the West. But the point is, let's look beyond Alabama's dominance and the fact that it'll be favored in every game. Just to look at that and say, hey, if Alabama gets back to the playoff, it will have done it against pretty brutal competition, no matter what the point spreads might indicate before each game.
And a lot of tough road atmospheres too. They
Yeah.
will, the atmospheres are always great when Alabama comes to town, but you're talking about, like we said, a Texas and Arkansas, Tennessee, LSU, Ole Miss. Like, that's a road slate right there. So, yeah, there are easier road slates in the SEC, so that's something to keep in mind. Like we mentioned, they'll be favored in all their home games without question, but that's a lot of road games there that they'll be favored in, but that point spread may not be too high on some of those, just based on going into those atmospheres and just sort of the setup, perhaps, of where the opposition is at that point in their season.
Any parting thoughts on the Crimson Tide today?
No, I think they're the number 1 team in the country heading into the season. That's the hot take here to wrap up this edition of our previews. But no, I think that's what you expect, right? They're loaded with talent. They're the number 1 team for the reason, and they will undoubtedly be out to get back. Their spot at the top after that Georgia game last year, and we'll see how it plays out.
Well, to sum it up, Alabama, I've got a sheet of preseason all SEC selections, and that includes special teams and kick returners. But I count 19 players so far that have been named to somebody's first, second, third, or fourth all SEC team. That is incredible.
Not bad, is it?
No, that's points to talent and recruiting. But
Yes.
anyway, the sky is blue, water is wet, and Alabama is a heavy favorite to go back to the college football playoff and win the SEC. So with that, we bid you goodbye for today. We're going to preview all 14 SEC teams. We've either done your team or we will be getting to your team in the coming week or two. So with that, the best way to make sure you don't miss a thing here is to subscribe. And thank you for those who have done so. I'm Chris Lee. He's Blake Lovell. And we'll see you again soon at Southeastern 14.